So now I'm concerned about my cucumbers outside. These are the things that concern my life. You know,
That's good. That's good.
Slugs, cucumbers, and pilgrims walking up my. You know, I can see them. They've changed the course of the Camino here.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so you can walk two different ways, and there's a lot of pilgrims who stay after they finish their pilgrimage in Santiago. They stay. There's a couple of nice hotels, and you can always tell the pilgrims who stay at these nice hotels because they usually look like they have a little bit nicer equipment. And anyway, they walk right past my house to get to the trail. They pick it up here because they've stayed outside of town. Anyway, be that as it may, that's what it is. So I hear you might be headed towards this part of the world.
I know. I need to get my act together. I bought tickets and everything, and I'm coming up like in June too, so I'll be up there.
That's great.
A bunch. We'll have to go get a beverage with and also you need to meet one of my friend is pastor at First Pres Amarillo. So
sounds good. Yeah. If he's from Amarillo, we should do a steak eating contest.
Yeah, I've been taking me to the Big Texan before.
The Big Texan. Have you ever tried the 72-ounce Big Texan?
No, I'm not that brave. Although he's from Midland, so just to be, the great city of Midland.
The great city of Midland. Well, hey, listen. Now that we've gotten into Texas, let's get out of Texas and let's get over to Atlanta. We have a guest with us today, fellow Cru staff guy. Josh Irby is with us, who is on staff with Cru City, doing global mission stuff with them. And we were kind of going back and forth on some workplace chats. And Josh, you and a fellow Cru staff member have started a podcast called Mission Shift, which eager to talk about because you guys are finding out some really cool new things about as you think about the future of missions. But you are a fellow European missionary of long standing. Why don't you are currently though in Georgia, is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Atlanta, Georgia. Good to be with you guys, by the way.
Good to have you, man. Josh, I think we have seen each other at various conferences and meetings, maybe even fought over a last French fry in a buffet line before. This will probably be the longest and most significant interaction we've had other than the French fry.
That's right.
But we
that's right.
We don't talk about the French fries. Yeah.
Yeah. I still hold that against you. So this is a way of making up for that French fry incident.
That's right. You and your wife were overseas for a good long while. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, right after college, I moved over to Croatia for 2 years, and that's kind of my first dip into international missions and first experience in the Balkans. And I fell in love with Europe. I fell in love with the people, with the places, and with just the activity of drinking coffee and talking about spiritual things. I think I still make sure that I have an Italian espresso near to me at all times. There's one just in the other room over here. I have one at work. I have an espresso machine at work, one at home, just because I have to survive, But I went back to the States and worked with Cru in Atlanta for a while, but stayed connected through partnership with Croatia and Bosnia. And then finally just recruited myself and my family, my wife, Taylor, and at our time, our 2 kids. And we moved to Sarajevo in 2009. And that was an amazing experience, amazing adventure. Met some friends that, I'll be friends with the rest of my life and are still in communication with. And we lived there now with 5 kids, just moved back to the States at the beginning of the pandemic, which was a bit traumatic, another conversation to talk about. But overall, to me, Europe, the Balkans, I carry that with me. I kind of feel I'm at least half European now. And my kids are way more than that.
Yeah, definitely.
And so even my youngest, is 5 years old, and we adopted him from Bulgaria while we're over there. So we literally have Europe in our house, and we don't go a day without thinking about it.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing about Sarajevo? If someone's getting ready to get on a plane, what would you recommend that they have to do or see or eat or whatever?
Well, the people would be my number one. The first time I went to Sarajevo was I think it was winter winter 2000 or something like that, or it was winter 1999.
Oh, wow.
And we just walked onto the college campus. I mean, this is only a few years after the war.
Yeah.
Asked people, do you speak English? Next thing you know, we spent 4 hours at coffee with these two guys, that are showing us the town. It's just that classic hospitality of the Balkans, which is amazing. So if you can find yourself at coffee with some Bosnians or over a meal, that would be amazing. As far as the food goes, they have this kind of a stuffed phyllo dough called pita that they have stuff with cheese and vegetables or meat or whatever. Good. I love that. And then they're most famous for their cevapcici, the cevapi, which is these little rolls of meat, which are all over the Balkans, which is great. But and then what to do, we go downtown Sarajevo, just experience the different eras of the city and just breathe in the history. I think if you're someone who likes simplicity and clarity, I would not recommend Sarajevo. If you love complexity and history and just stories, that history is not a thing in the past. It like lives in the present in Sarajevo. It's a companion in life. And if you like that, man, got to get to Sarajevo.
Yeah, I've been wanting to go. The Balkans is just a fascinating place. Everything that's happened there, and the mix of the cultures, and Hopefully, I'll get to Sarajevo Sunday. I have had cevapi in Slovenia and Croatia, and it's good. It's very good. I mean, we saw it on the menu. We asked the waitress, "What is it?" And she said, "Meat in different shapes." And I think she was trying to say, meat formed into different shape. And so we're like, okay, well, you said meat and shape, so let's go for that. And then we realized, okay, we now know what we're doing here.
That's funny, because I was in Albania and reading an English menu, and it said meat in different shapes.
Because he was like maybe come in elephant shape. Like,
I was a little disappointed. I was like, "Where's the tactile?"
It's the same thing, it's similar in Albania. They just have a different name for it. But the worst description of cevapi is meat fingers, which is like, I don't know if I want to eat that. Yeah. But there's a big debate between Croatia and Bosnia, because in Croatia they eat their cevapi with ivar, which is this wonderful vegetable spread.
Awesome. That's really good.
I still have it in my refrigerator here in Atlanta. But in Bosnia, they eat it with kajmak, which is this between sour cream and cream cheese.
Yeah.
That sounds good too.
Yeah.
So
that sounds good.
That's funny, because
which is better.
Well, because I used to live in Uzbekistan, and we had all of those because of probably former Soviet world. I don't know, but maybe Central Asian world. I don't know which it was, but kajmak was something that we got all the time, as well as ivar. But in Sweden, because we have so many Bosnian people from Bosnian origin, when you can get ivar in every grocery store in Sweden. Nice. It's like a standard. It's right next to the Swedish pickles, it's just like, that it's going to be there. So anyway, and you could get kajmak as well, less so, but we could get actually some pretty good dairy stuff. So I'm pretty sure
the kajmak is Ottoman influence.
Is that what it is?
The Ottomans spread a lot of these things across the Balkans
across the world
directions.
Yeah. I was at a conference one time here in Europe, and we were talking. We were introduced. It was a training, so we were going to be together for a couple of years, I think, and we were going around the room introducing ourselves, and first time we'd met, and so someone would go around, "Oh, I'm from the Netherlands. I'm from this place, that place," and every time that a new place would come up, I would go, "Oh, I love this." If I had been there, I'd be like, "I love this about the place." And so finally, Martin Gast, who is the European SLM director for student ministry director for a while, looked at me and goes, "I think you experience culture through food." And I was like, "Yes, I think that's correct. I think that's correct." Yeah. So anyway,
I mean, guys, this is one of the best food podcasts I've ever been on. I mean, it's amazing.
We do talk a little bit about food.
Soon we'll talk about sweaty balls. Isn't that a Saturday Night Live? Anyway, that was the real low point. Okay. Well, let's talk about missions. Okay, so Josh, you guys have started a podcast over there at Cru City called Mission Shift, and I've had the pleasure of looking through kind of some of the guests, some of the contributors to it.
Some heavy hitters.
Man, you guys have been busy talking to people. Talk to us for a few, take it where you want, but just some kind of general direction. Why'd you start the podcast? What was the general thinking? What are you trying to do with the podcast? And then we'll just rabbit trail it from there.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of started in reverse. We didn't say, let's make a podcast. Now, what do? We had this conviction as a team that the world is changing and has changed, that global Christianity is changing and has changed, and that means that our global missions is changing. And if global missions is changing, then we in the West need to change the way that we engage in missions. Mm-hmm. I mean, facts like the fact that, beginning of the 1900s, there were 9 million Christians in Africa, and now there's over 700 million.
Yeah.
Or facts like the fact that there are more Anglicans, going to church in African countries than there are in England and America and Canada combined. So those kind of realities we started to see, and we're saying, so what does that mean for us? I mean, here we are, a team that we're supposed to be sending people to engage in missions, and we don't want to do that in a way that is unhelpful. And also, we're noticing in America perhaps a trend away from sending and being mm-hmm. involved in global missions towards local concerns, because we had a lot of local concerns, and we have a lot of local concerns, especially in 2020. You have a pandemic, you have racial division, you have political cycle, you have nationalism, you have all these things that are rising up. And so people are like, I got too much to do at home. How in the world am I going to think about Spain or Nigeria or wherever? Plus, in Nigeria, they got their own churches. They already have Christians established there. Why do we need to go there? And so there was all these questions bubbling around. So we decided to create a survey and just try to see, are our convictions true or not? And we ended up talking to about 60 different leaders around the world. And most of those are not part of our organization. Most of those we found just through networking, and we talked to someone and say, who else should we talk to? Mm-hmm. And we got to talk to people in Sri Lanka, and in multiple places in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, in Europe. And what we found out is our convictions were right. Missions has changed significantly, or the world has changed significantly. And we can actually be hurtful in how we try to help if we don't recognize those changes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you found that we could actually be hurtful?
Yeah, trying to pick one.
So a lot. There's a lot.
Yes, we're good at that. Paul Borthwick had this illustration, and he talked about how we can think of missions as a relay, where we in the West, we've been running with the baton, and then we hand it off to somebody else. The global church, for example, that majority world church, and then we can now retire from the race and cheer while they run on. He's like, I don't like that illustration because it means we get out of the race, but we're all called to be in the race, right?
Yeah.
Just one way we can hurt is just not bringing the resources we have to bear to the task of global missions. But there's another way we can hurt, and that's where we just keep on going on like it's 1980, like it's in 1910 in Edinburgh, there was this big, missions conference to try to finish the task. And there were like 7 non-Westerners there out of 1,200 people.
Yeah.
So we can continue thinking we're in the lead. We're just running on our own. And then we kind of show up in other countries and do our thing. We're not learning about that culture. We're not being relevant. We're kind of treating it like we're at the head of the table, and these other people can sit at the kids' table if they want. Mm-hmm. And we express that in the way we talk about other people. One of the guys, Pastor Adrian, talked about a woman who came on a short-term trip and was asked the people, have you heard of the internet? and one of the Sri Lankans was like, this person is supposed to help us, and they don't know that we have the internet. What do they think we are? And so we become hurtful when we try to continue with kind of a patriarchal or Western dominant way. And then I think another big way is just the role of money and power. We talked with a guy, Dr. Lazarus Piri, who was born in Zambia, went on to get his PhD at Edinburgh, and now leads a theological school there. And his topic is mission without empire, and how since Constantine, the center of empire was synonymous with the center of Christianity. So the Roman Empire, Europe, England, America, and now for the first time, the American Empire still leading in military, leading in money, leading economically, leading in education, but it's not the center of Christianity anymore. And so when we come with our passport and our power and our money, we're probably going to do more harm than we do if we come humbly and listening and learning. It's kind of one of the big lessons.
Yeah. But those are great. And those are, I think things, Barrett, you and I have, struggled with ourselves and thinking, and even just seeing it, seeing it played out in many different ways. I'm interested, and then so there is this shift, there is this total change of the world, which on one hand is amazing, and it basically is proof to some degree that depending on how you want to, without and try to be too plant our flag and say we did it right, but that the Great Commission is in the process of being completed.
Yes,
that's incredible. I mean, our campus team in Spain has Argentines, has a Panamanian, has a Lithuanian, so they have this multicultural group of people who are now going to the world. So, so I guess the question then for me, and I think this is what we probably, Barrett and I often struggle with, what is the role of Cru as in Cru USA, I would say, or the role of a mission organization now, what as they look into the next, obviously there's some changes they need, and we want to move away. I think we all agree too that the idea that, well, we've done the job, it's our turn to retire and or get on the backbench and cheer, kind of be the third string veteran quarterback who just kind of calls plays. How do we? Because at the same time, I think I've felt the same thing you felt, is like when you go back to the States now, the global missions emphasis in a lot of churches has faded. Even there's a little bit of maybe an embarrassment of maybe global missions, definitely. Right? But so how do we get churches, people back into the idea that no, the Great Commission is still important. Going to the world is still important. We're still a part of that, but change a little bit of our, let's just say in this sense, Western mentality of we've got all the answers, we've done it. Follow us. How do we begin to do that?
That's part of the reason why we made this podcast was there's educational aspects to that. Like, I've been involved with missions my whole life, because my father was a pastor and grew up in church that was involved in missions. I didn't know what was going on in outside of America. Didn't know there was a Costa Rican Mission Association planting churches in North Africa. I didn't know that Nigeria's wanted to send 50,000 missionaries the next 15 years to the hardest to reach places. I didn't know all that stuff. And so the education of learning, and I think you were right when you're talking about it's not a planting a flag, it's saying the gospel went out and it bore fruit. Look at the fruit. The places that were mission fields are now mission forces. And they not only have come to know Christ, they're vibrantly following him and wanting to bring that message all around the world, whether it's kind of this reverse missions idea coming out of Africa and colonial countries back to Europe. The largest church in Europe was in Ukraine, led by a Nigerian. So you have this mission force going out. So there's educational aspect to that. But then there's also this thing that we're not good at as Americans. As my friend recently said, Americans are number one at thinking they're number one.
That's good.
There's shout out to Stephen who said that. There's humility. Yeah. That is the thing that we got to get, because humility allows us to not show up with our program we created in America and say, if you translate this will work where you are. And we'll pay for it.
Yeah. So with that then, because you mentioned earlier kind of how the center of missional sending, I don't know how you put it, has always been kind of the center, where the center of empire was. And if that's changing, then how do you see the mission itself changing? Because it's easy for those who are in the center of actual empire. So in the sense of being American, we're number one at thinking we're number one. If we're going somewhere, it's easy for us to take our cultural equivalency of, or when we think that our culture is superior and therefore our brand of Christian thought is superior. Do you have a sense that those who are sending, like if Nigeria is sending X number of missionaries out into the world, are those missionaries fundamentally different? Do you get a sense that the Costa Rican missions agency who's establishing churches in North Africa, it seems to me that it may be that it's it's easier for them to be humble going in there because they're not trying to establish beach fronts for Costa Rica. Costa Rica has enough good beaches.
Right.
But I mean, do you get what I'm saying? Like,
I know. Yeah.
Is there a sense of a humility going in? Like it may be that for the first time, we're actually able just to take the gospel rather than Coca-Cola or,
I think you're right on it. I think that's maybe what God is doing in this age. I mean, when you go as from empire, you bring empire with you,
right?
You bring, you rest on your money, you rest on your power, you rest on your culture, and then it's really hard to share for me as an American to share the gospel, and not to have all that cultural baggage with it. There's the gospel and, well, Josh does this, so therefore that's Christian, and Josh does this, and therefore that's Christian, right? What we're seeing come out of, say, Nigeria, most of the missionaries go without any financial support. They just move to the country and trust God to figure it out. The whole paradigm is crazy, right? But they're able to send more people because they're able to go and do it that way. Also, because they're not going in the power of their passport, who do they have to rely on? Well, God, Christ working through them, the Holy Spirit empowering them. That kind of sounds like what we had the first couple hundred years of Christianity, after Christ. So
passport of Judea wasn't as quite as powerful as the Roman passport. It wasn't. Although Paul had a Roman passport. That was helpful.
And I think that's important. This is not saying that using what you have is bad. Right. Yeah. There's a period when our blue passport, from America got us into countries around the world and got us into places. Now it's starting to work against us in some places. Right. Yeah. But just think of as you go with empire, what has gotten mixed up with that in the history: colonialism, slavery, capitalism, just all these different things that come with it. And it's just complex to separate it out. And maybe God's just saying, well, now we don't have to separate it out. All they got is Jesus. They're relying on him. They're picking up and moving and trusting God to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tricky thing because I think it, one of the, so I don't know if this is controversial or not, but one of the big issues obviously is the colonial past, and there's things in the past, missions, and obviously there's a very good critique there, and I think which is where you guys need to go and where we're going, and trying to think how do you parse that out, and how do you really become missionaries that are sent in the power of the Holy Spirit in the name of Jesus as servants, as humble, learners, all that stuff. But the flip side of that, there does seem to be in certain, and it feels like even more in maybe more conservative areas of evangelicalism, a real looking back at history and going, whoa, missions was bad. And so I'm interested as you talk to maybe some national leaders from Africa, from Asia, their response to that, because I'm probably someone who pushes back a little on that, saying the historical record isn't quite as bad. Yes, colonialism was the bad connection, but a lot of missionaries, fought against that even, or against it themselves, and did things. And so there's maybe a bad reading of history that gets kind of circled back into, all missions and even, like I said, it's just something I was kind of put me on my back foot several years ago, and I was actually in South Korea, mainly with evangelical students, from a seminary, and they were really all shocked that the South Koreans spoke highly of missionaries. So they were, at least the community we were in, they really talked. And I think South Korea is a different kind of thing. There wasn't necessarily colonial power per se when U.S. and Brits came in. There was some different things that happened there, but because people spoke so highly of missions in the 50s and 40s, or maybe the 30s, but not the 40s. People were really like, whoa, we thought all missions was bad, was kind of some of my classmates' perception. So I'm interested in what you've heard from national leaders, because I also worry that it's just it's an American conversation we're having, while the actual people whose culture and history that is aren't really involved in the conversation. That's another critique there.
So no nationals that we spoke to anywhere in the world were negative about what missions did. They were thankful. That was the main thing I'll describe, thankful. Because many of them came to Christ through Western missionaries. Yeah. And they recognized that. And they know the graveyards that are in their country of missionaries who had come and died. And they knew what it took to bring the gospel there in history. So the number one thing is thank you. Now, that was quickly followed with, now things have changed, so let's go in new ways. Let's go together. Yeah. And those are not, you can hold both of those in tension, right? Yeah. You can be thankful for the way something was in the past, but also not want it to continue into the future in the same way. So that's one thing that we definitely heard. And then another person that I found out about through this process of interviewing people is Lamin Sane. He's passed away now. He's an amazing theologian missiologist from Africa, who talks about the goal of missions is not to create a Western African, but to create a renewed African. Yeah. And what does that look like? And how the gospel was meant to be translated into these different cultures. And that's a unique thing about the gospel and about our mission and our missions, is that we're bringing a message that's meant to be translated into the culture to draw out the beauty of the culture that's embedded, that got embedded in that culture. For example, the Costa Rican missionaries in northern Iraq are doing a way more communal style of ministry than we would ever do in our Western individualism. Yeah. And so God is bringing that in. And so to me, it's not this missions is colonial. Yeah. I mean, cultural imperialism was happening, right? The British Empire. Yep. It was happening, or even the Roman Empire. Just because they were on the same boats doesn't mean that they were doing that. Nor does it mean that we're not guilty of cultural imperialism many times as missionaries. And that's that wrestling. That's that wrestling we have to do, saying, how do we, like Christ in Philippians 2, make ourselves nothing so that we can, serve, and just as who made himself nothing so that, and put away his godhood, which is way more than our Americanhood to put away, so that he could, as a servant, bring change into our life. How do we do that also as missionaries and believers?
Amen. So you said a word there that I thought is probably a super important word, which is together.
Yeah.
I feel like that when I hear that word, it excites me about missions. That we go together with everyone, all these different cultures, which makes it sometimes harder, I think, and maybe a little more complicated. But there's something beautiful about together.
I think that's part of the future of missions. It's been for the last 15 years I've been talking about, not from the West to the rest, but everywhere to everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not just one line, it's multiple lines merging together and going over here and crossing. And that how do we really embrace partnership and relationship and mission and not task?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Then as we embrace that, how do we together go somewhere else? So when I was in Bosnia, we had Albanians and Bosnians on our team, but we were still kind of an American dominant team. How do you have Americans going with Albanians where they're the dominant part of the team to some third place? How do we create those? And this is where we're getting to crew ourselves. How do we think within our own organization about not just each country doing their own thing, but how do we work together to do things?
It seems to me that means we're going to have to rewrite some of the I mean, long pause in the podcast. I think we're going to have to rewrite or kill some sacred cows in order to do that. Like there's going to be this, it's going to be a slaughterhouse for a while in order to figure that out. Maybe that's the wrong analogy to put, but I mean, in the sense of, you mentioned one of them, your example was Nigerians going without being funded or raising support. Like in Western mission agencies similar to ours, that's a sacred cow. The way we fund ourselves is a sacred cow. And I'm not sure, I'm not saying that therefore, because we hold it dear, it needs to die. It has its use. Are there any ways or anything specific that comes to mind from anyone that you guys have talked to of sacred cows that are kind of like, look, in order to accomplish this, doing it together, these are going to be some of the sacred cows that are going to have to die. So it doesn't mean it has to be our sacred cows as Americans. It can just be sacred cows that are dear to missions or dear to or common among cultures or whatever else. So I don't want to just pick on American dominant missions agencies, but just anything.
OM is doing in the US is doing some cool stuff. They basically have moved from where the majority of their people they're sending are supported staff to now the majority are people who are moving to other countries, getting jobs there. And then the minority are people who are supported. And they're thinking about almost like how to help those people find those jobs, develop their resume for that, but then also be disciples. So there's a training they want to help disciples get jobs all around the world and to be naturally in those environments. That's one example I can think of. I think there's a bit of a sacred cow of, and this is how Paul Borthwick put it, your missions board at the church of 50 white people who are going to the world. And he's like, if your missionaries look like you and are from the same culture, then maybe you're not doing missions in the new way. The sacred cow of we develop programs that we think will work anywhere, and then we just go and translate them. Our material.
Yeah.
Now,
that's a good. Barrett and I try to kill that sacred cow all the time. It maybe sometimes made us a little unpopular.
I mean, as national,
a little bit of a zombie.
Probably got pinged all the time as national leaders. As I was one too, of like, hey, we got this thing. It's going to transform your ministry. We'll pay for it. Just who's going to translate it, and whatever.
Yeah. Which materials that are developed are great. And goodness, if we can just translate them and you've got a great material, then that's great. It is though interesting how often I like to say that we still put our hopes in chariots. We just, they're tools, and even though the chariot can have a lot of Christian message written on it, it can be covered in gospel centered bumper stickers. It's still a chariot, and at the end of the day, and that can't be where our hope lies. To me, this stuff sounds very exciting. What is anytime that big change happens? Interestingly enough, we had Todd Bolsinger on this podcast a long time ago, the author of Canoeing the Mountains, which is a book about leadership change, and it was a great book. And he's a really great thinker on that. And right now I'm actually, we ran out of kids books to read my kids, because we went through all of the English books at the local library in like a week and a half. And so we were like, great. And I didn't want to buy anything. And it was late one night and the kids wanted me to read something to them. So I was like, I don't know, guys, I've got Undaunted Courage, the story of Lewis and Clark. And my kids were like, sure, why not? So it's like an 800-page book by Stephen Ambrose.
It's a big one.
And I've read it before, but I'm rereading it to my kids. And so I'm kind of in that vein of thinking about Canoeing the Mountains and every time, and change leadership and daring leadership. Anytime you, if it is truly a mission shift and these things are happening, there's got to be pushback in all sorts of directions. As you've talked to people, what are the bits that are hard to swallow? So I'm not saying that, or what are the things that you find hard to swallow? Maybe is even a good way to put it.
I like to be important. I like to feel like I show up and have something to give. That's hard, and I'm future oriented, so I get more like you with the excitement. But I think we're addicted to urgency. I think that. How do we recruit for missions?
Yep.
If you don't do it, it's not going to get done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what is your messaging now when the majority of people who are getting the job done are not from the West?
Right. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it was interesting. The people will remain nameless, but I've recently seen a recruiting video of a new thing. And, I remember watching it going, wow, this is really playing on the emotions of like the student who's watching this is literally the only person on earth that could fit this. Does this really fit what it was a different feeling than I had ever had in 20 years of ministry. So yeah, that definitely is one.
And how long can emotions help you survive moving overseas and doing hard things?
Yeah.
Not so long.
No. 7 months into a transition, I don't know where the emotions are anymore.
Yeah. It's there's a weird high you get, right? Your first 4 or 5 months on stint, Yeah. And every once in a while I get a hit of that because I go somewhere new or something happens that just kind of you go, oh wow, I remember those great. But then you realize, okay, well, missions is a long, steady march through Mordor, really. With someone most likely someone's carrying you half the way. It is not and it's just getting up and getting the job done or some days just getting up and crying. And then going back to bed.
My job today was to cry. Check box.
Garrick, have you been? Do you have cameras set up around my house lately?
Yeah. Well, we've all been there, right? And so I think that's the rub too. Is like the way we do. I think we do tend to. It's America, right? America, and I see it sometimes seep into Latin America a little bit too with this great adventure, and it's really good tactic for recruiting. But you're right, it creates this kind of. I think we see a lot of students come in now with very high expectations of what's going to happen, and part of that's I don't necessarily know that's their fault or the crew's fault. It's the culture's fault in a lot of ways. Everything that is going to happen in your life is just going to be amazing and deep and profound. And that's just not life.
We talked about how, like, say I go to a church and I want to raise $100,000 to build a building in some country, that is I have an emotional video about why it's so important and It's very concrete. It's pretty easy to raise that 100,000 for the building or whatever. Now, say that I come to the church and say, I need $10,000 to take a few people over to this country. We're not going to change the country. We're just going to get to know the people there.
Yeah.
And what they're like, the believers and what they're doing. That's harder to raise that 10,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because we don't value the relationships and we want that concrete life-changing project. Now, Paul Borthwick told a story on the podcast about a church that built a church building for a church in Mexico, and 5 years in, when they finally finished it, they're like, "How do you like a church building?" It's like, it's pretty nice. We really needed a clinic, but the church building is awesome. And so if they would have spent $10,000 to go and get to know the people and spend some time with them, they would have built the building they actually needed. Yeah. And so that's part of this whole missions is relationship.
Yeah.
It's not a task. Even think about the way that the Great Commission is phrased. Go and make disciples of all nations. That's not a product. That's a person that is, and discipleship happens in relationship. So missions is relational. And so you can't sell on the urgency quite the same way anymore, but we can talk about how the gospel has gone out. It has worked. It's borne fruit all around the world. And we get the privilege of being friends with those people and coming alongside them and together being the body of Christ. That's a true global body of Christ. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't matter if you're the hand or the arm or the head, or not the head because Jesus is the head, or the shoulder or whatever part of the body of Christ. We want to be the best one of that we can be. And let's keep finding where we're supposed to fit in that.
Do you feel like, so I had a really awesome question that has completely rearranged itself in my head. And now there are Swedish and Spanish terms floating around too. So this has become a disaster. It's pretty much my life right now.
But this is the realness.
This is missions. So no, as you guys think about like, just the idea of you can't show up and kind of go from a position of strength. You can't, it's not just coming in and going, okay, I'm American and I'm here to change the world, or you can't raise support from that position of kind of, only you can fulfill it or whatever. Kind of the long, as we're thinking about people-centered missions, reaching people, a longer haul, something that's not results driven. I've often wondered recently, because so many of the places of the world, at least in recent history and with the internet and kind of things, are missions agencies from other countries that are sending people, or maybe not even missions agency, just a church that's like, it just gets fired up for Jesus, and people go, I want to go. And they say, go, and they bless them and they pray over them, and they got no clue how to do it. Are they going with the attitude of, this is what my impact is going to be? Like, I'm going to go change the world? Because that seems a particularly human thing. And I realize it's a very American thing. And we've made it look a little bit like capitalism, like ultimately like a pitch to the board of directors and your end of year dividends forecast. I stumbled on to Facebook the other day, a guy who works for a missions agency, and I was like, what? A guy went to college with, and so I was like, oh, what missions agency? So I kept clicking through and went to their Facebook page, and the last post that they had was, this is our end of the year impact report for what we've seen God do throughout the world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. They're trying to be faithful to their donors and everything else, but it just seemed to me, impact report. Like, if I had an impact report of my time in Sweden, it should be really short. Like, so did I waste my time? Did my supporters waste their time? No, I don't think so. And I could come up with some stuff. Oh, this is what we saw and everything. And God was certainly faithful, and some cool stuff happened. But my point is I would have to really think hard. And at the end of the day, do I really know the impact? I don't think I do. So my question is, are foreign, or not foreign, but around the world, are they taking this American mindset into their missions, or is there a fundamentally different position, or does it vary from place to place?
That is a really great question. I would love to explore more with people that we've talked to. I mean, we didn't get into that per se. I will guess at that. I do think there's probably some sense of the same kind of, I'm gonna go to make a difference.
Yeah.
Right. That's why you go. Yeah. Now, I think that difference is probably way more relational than the way we think about establishing an organization there, planting a flag there. We just think they're not going as the organization, they're going as themselves many times and connected to this association and church that's supporting them. And maybe sometimes there's church planting, so they want to plant their church there. And then you think about the example of that church in Ukraine, the big church. He wants to change Ukraine, right. And so there is some of that as well. But it's a challenging thing.
Yeah, because how do you unwrite the human, sinful nature that wants to claim itself as the pride of man, right? How do you unwrite that into the story? Somehow God uses it anyway. So, but it seemed just kind of one of those things that I've been processing lately. Of like, now we're on this new thing that we're doing here in Spain, and looking back on my time in Sweden, I see so many times where I was writing myself into the story and trying to be able to say, this is my impact, this is my legacy, this is whatever. And God used those things. So it's I'm amazed at God's grace in using flawed vessels as he does of us. But as I think about now, I'm thinking about things very differently at this stage of life. Also a bit humbled, kind of coming in where, I left the head honcho and I've come in and I'm the head nothing. So it's kind of a good place to be, of kind of, I'm having that attitude of, I'm looking around and I'm seeing Spaniards and Lithuanians and everybody who's all in this mess together. And it's like, okay, I'm a part of this. And that's a fundamentally different position. So when I write even newsletters now, those are different than they were in my first years in Sweden.
Yeah, I can speak personally. I mean, I think that there's something there. I experienced it when I was living in one of the least reached countries of Europe, and one of the most difficult places post-war, post-communist, majority is Islamic. So, I mean, it's a very challenging environment. And I'm a very driven, kind of project-oriented person. I like to set goals. I like to accomplish it. I'm a high achiever. It's my number one on the Strength Finders. And, God moved me to a place where you barely can achieve like setting up a bank account, much less, a movement. And where I came back to, and I think that this may be some of where we want to be, is am I being faithful to the calling that God has on my life? Because although maybe we don't play as urgent a role as Americans in the mission of God today, my life is somewhat urgent. I have a limited amount of time. I can use it the one way, and then that time is gone, right? And I want to use it doing the things that God wants me to do. So am I waking up this morning? Did God tell me to move to Bosnia? He did. I'm there. Did he tell me to move to Spain? He did. I'm there. So how can I be faithful so that if I leave, hypothetically, after 11 years and your plans didn't succeed, not so hypothetically, can I be okay? Can I be okay? And taking that pressure off allows us to go differently as well. I'm not showing up in Africa or Sri Lanka or wherever, and I've got to get X amount of people to come to X program, because that's what I'm sent to do.
Right.
I can go with no agenda and say, what are your dreams? What is your vision? How can we help with that? I mean, one of my personal goals right now on the team that I lead is to rewrite the way that America relates to Europe in our organization. And it's hard.
That'd be nice. That's a very good.
Yeah. Hey, there's a core group of you. There's a core group of you whose goal that is, and that is encouraging. So,
yeah,
and so as we're working on our mission statement, like I was very, very insistent that the vision and the dreams and the mission don't come from us, from our side, but that we're responding to the vision and dream and mission of Europeans and how we can help out. Now, guess what? Even in trying and focusing so much on that, I put help the vision, bring to reality the vision and dreams of people in Europe. Still, which way is who's helping and who's being helped?
Yeah.
And I totally missed that. And I'm like, I'm making a podcast about this. I'm thinking about this every day. And I'm still like thinking my arrow's going one way. Where's the mutuality? Where's the reciprocity? What can I learn? What do I need help from? And so relationship is complicated. That's why we'd rather just do a program. But if we come into relationship and we have people around us that goes, how can, as I go in and I have a relationship with people who are dreaming and have vision about what could happen in Europe, and as I'm trying to bring whatever God's put in me and in our team and in the resource pool of America, also what are the resource and the strengths of Europe and how we can learn and grow through that relationship. And so that in the end, I mean, really, I just want to be friends. I want to be like, that guy is my best friend, because if I need something, he's there. Yeah. When he makes a mistake, he's honest about it. And so how do we build those type of relationships in our missional approach? I think that would kind of change the game.
Yeah, I actually think in order for how do you say it? God's economy of missions is not a one-way flow chart. It is a reciprocal relationship. So Paul, who had everything to give in Romans 1, says, I endeavor to go to you so that you and I might both benefit from our exchange of faith. I mean, it's the Harkins paraphrase. But so Paul even has that attitude of this lengthy letter, going into the lengthy letter that he's writing in order to make sure that these people have the right kind of theology. He's expecting to receive a benefit from them in the exchange of that. And I've, this is now my fourth continent to do missions on. And I've never gone to a place and not fundamentally been changed by the location that I've been in and learned something new from the people that I'm the one that's supposed to be, that I've seen myself as the grand savior coming in to make sure, these poor people have Jesus. And I'm usually the one that walks away going, I think I got a lot more out of that transaction. Transaction's not the right word, but you get what I'm saying. So I think we need a lot more of that attitude. I think if the church, if we were a little bit more honest about missions, I think the pitch, if I had to make a pitch to people, I haven't really done heavy recruiting in a long time, but if I had to recruit people to either a short-term or a long-term project or, long-term overseas, I think my benefit would be come and get engaged in being changed. Like you're never going to give in a situation where you are not getting so much more, because it's the nature of how God works, and you're going to see things in new ways. And that, to me, the kind of mission shift that you're describing is actually one that I think that is really healthy, because hopefully the church begins to learn and see some new things. If we go into it with the right attitude, if we don't go into it with the right attitude, we're going to be really frustrated and really, there's going to be a lot of bridges that get burned.
Yeah. I think, when you were talking, as we're talking, this is kind of an Uber theme to this podcast, but pilgrimage. Yeah. And I wonder if, and there's not, it's an area which hasn't been explored. I don't think. I know of one article that talks about, maybe a couple articles I've found out there in the nether regions of theological education, and thinking of trying to think of pilgrimage and missions as maybe pilgrimage is the model, or sojourning, maybe be the word biblical with is it First Peter. But this idea that, because I think you're right, whether we realize it or not, when we come, especially with Cru, which has, thank God for 1950s business evangelicalism, let's go out and get stuff. It impacted the world in a lot of ways, but that's kind of what we bring into it a lot of the times. The first conversation you're having with people is like, okay, we got this money, we want we want these outcomes, and you're, whereas maybe the pilgrimage model is really the more of a metaphor for missions than anything else. Maybe, I don't know. That's something Barrett and I've been kind of kicking around for a while, trying to land that plane a little bit. Because being a pilgrim there's a lot of as you were talking, Barrett, about being a mission. You're talking about being a pilgrim, being someone who leaves home, wanders, meets new people, is changed by those people, that experience, and then comes to a new reality of their life in a new place. It's
and in pilgrimage, you're sort of going somewhere, right? Yeah. But you also, it's not all mapped out on the way.
Yeah.
There's something to that.
If you do it right, if you do pilgrimage right, I think that's then you shouldn't have it all clear.
Yeah.
I would say that even though, as we've acknowledged, that our organization has not always been engaged in the conversation about missions, I would give a shout out to organization. I think the recent changes in the rise of the national ministries is moving in the direction of local ownership to a greater degree. And we are very well positioned because Cru is not America Cru.
Yeah.
And we have these fruit of the gospel mission all around the world.
Yeah.
Now, what do we do with that? How do we work better together?
Right.
And how do we, coming from the former power position and the still empire position, learn from our brothers and sisters in other countries who, to be honest, are trusting God in much more challenging situations many times, way much more deep character than me, who's struggling because, oops, I ran out of my coffee and now I have to order some more on Amazon and I have to wait till tomorrow to get it. It's like we have so much to learn from those people. So how do we as an organization embrace that and go multi-directional?
Yeah, Mike Schatzman in Lisbon always invites in. I think the director in Ethiopia, maybe, who talks to his interns, and listening to that guy's life is just it's ridiculous that he knows suffering in ways that we could never. And that's one of the great things about being with the body of Christ. Is like, I think as Americans, we need a better theology of suffering and, resiliency and burnout are big topics. Yeah. But part of it is because we don't have a good theology of suffering and a good theology of those things that those have now become issues because we haven't had to in large measure. But yet the good news is that organizationally, but also body of Christ wise, is we have lots of people from all over the place, including, to be honest, our African-American brothers and sisters who could tell us a thing or two about what it's like to be, to suffer. And so hearing from those corners, I think are really important. So that's you're right. That's one of the huge benefits of being a part of the network that we have among crews. You're never too far away from being able to find someone who it's just, and we have them even here in Europe, right? So a lot of the European leaders were people who grew up under communism or, saw revolutions and even now Ukraine. Yeah. So anyway, Garrick.
No, I think that is important to emphasize. Cru has had this amazing capacity and desire to build up national leadership and hand over quick. Because observing other organizations, and particularly denominational, I've even had conversations with people, friends who said, "Oh no, we can't turn it over to the nationals yet. Like they need many, and Cru." I think part of it comes out of being student focused for so long, the willingness to go, hey, you're 22 and you want to do that. I mean, it's kind of nuts, the stuff we do. Like you've never been you've been trained for like a couple of weeks. Yeah, we'll send you to Romania in the middle of during the Cold War. Good luck. But at the same time, we've been willing to hand leadership over a lot quicker. I think in most places. Than sometimes other organizations are.
And we can be hard on ourselves. We can be hard on ourselves, but it is worth celebrating that, and that we have that legacy and opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah.
So where are you guys, or Josh, where are you optimistic?
I am super optimistic that the Great Commission God's great commission, God's mission that's begun in the garden is going to succeed. As Steve Addison said, I don't know if you remember, but Jesus rose from the dead and he gave us the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's just, and to see that happening, I mean, 9 million Africans to 700 million Africans in like a century. Who are believers. It's just, and the believers who are passionately following Jesus. So I feel extremely optimistic in that. Also, I'm optimistic that we can rewrite old relationships in the way that we related. I'm optimistic that, as we've heard from many people that have said, this is the conversation that I wanted to have happen. Thank you. Related. I know there's more people that are like, I feel something's different. I know we should be doing something different. I don't know how to do that. I mean, we got missions pastors now that are trying to rewrite the way their church is operating in missions because of these topics. So I'm very optimistic about that, and I'm excited about my co-host with the podcast is Karita Chen. She's Chinese American, and she said, Josh, you probably grew up and you'd see missionaries and thought I could be one of those. I didn't, because they were all white men. I'm really optimistic about all those people that thought I don't get to be involved, and now they know they can.
That's cool. Where are you optimistic about Europe?
I'm excited about this. Not to get too much into a kind of our internal speak, but I mean, I'm excited about the merger between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Having been in Central and Eastern Europe, there are some amazing, godly followers of Jesus. They're strong leaders. I'm excited about that having an influence on Western Europe. I think Western Europe has been wrestling with issues of postmodernism and postmodernism and deconstruction and all these things. That they've been wrestling with. I'm looking forward to them having an influence on Eastern Europe. And I think because of advances in technology, like we're doing right now, having this conversation over Zoom and the closeness of the world, I think the idea of doing missions together, even though we're continents apart, is more realistic than ever before. Like last year, like I said, I'm jumping on a plane tonight to Romania, and I'm meeting 4 business people from Atlanta who are part of Leader Impact. And they're not just going on a mission trip. They're going to meet the Romanian business people they've been mentoring for the last year on Zoom.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to go to their companies and like talk to their management teams. And it's like that level of connections. There's that relationship that we're talking about. It's like not come to Romania, have an experience, eat some food. It's like build relationships, be connected there. So I'm optimistic about the potential of that kind of partnership growing.
That's cool. That's good stuff. I always like hearing the optimistic perspective for Europe as well, because it can become so it easily becomes that's just that hard place, but to hear the stories, there's I think 2 things. There's a quote from not Andrew Peterson. Well, I have lots of quotes from Andrew Peterson, but also Eugene Peterson wrote the book Along Obedience in the Same Direction, and that to me seems that defines missions. I realize he was trying to define discipleship, but that seems to me it's just mission. And then the other would be I don't know if you guys in your podcast ever came across Stefan Paas, who is a Dutch missiologist, wrote a book called Pilgrims and Priests, which is for me, and Garrick and I we talked to him as well. We both read his books. Phenomenal thinker on the European scale and what it's going to take to reach Europe. And really he describes kind of that sort of thing is people who are willing to be faithful and be planted and be faithful in the places where they are. So whether it be Romanian businessmen or church planters or whatever else. In his framework out of First Peter of Pilgrims and Priests has been a paradigm shifter for us. So both of those things, as you were talking, reminded of those things. Josh, I feel like we could just keep going.
Yeah, this is
for days.
Fantastic. This may need to be
we'll
follow up.
We can have a follop. You guys are fun to talk to.
Yeah,
I'm built for rabbit trails. This is like my wife. I'm omni interested in everything.
This is exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then. Okay. Before we finish, where would people who would like to start listening to because the list of people on there is
incredible.
Important.
Yeah,
it's incredible. You guys have done a really great job. But where can people connect?
The easiest place is cru.org/mission shift.
Okay.
That's the best place. We also have, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those different ways to connect. And then we'd love to hear from you just at missionshift@cru.org. You can email us or message us on some other means to discuss. And that is, we did a short run narrative style podcast. So it's not interview. We did a bunch of interviews, but then clipped it up topically. Mm-hmm. So there's 8 kind of from beginning to end journey discussion of this. And then now soon we'll be in a stage where we're going to release the full interviews we did with people like Della Dodovo, like Lazarus Piri, who I talked about, and we'll release those over the coming months. But really that 8 episodes is kind of a complete discussion of what's going on, how do we respond, and kind of what the future could look like.
Cool.
Excellent.
Well, we look forward to doing a deep dive into Mission Shift, and we want to have you back on as well.
Yeah, we'd love. I hope maybe Karita can come with me next time.
That'd be
that'd be great. I would be remiss to not mention that this is this year is the 20th year anniversary of the release of Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco, one of the great American albums. If you guys have never heard of it, go out and get it. The story about just real quick. This is a good ending piece maybe, but this album. They turned it into their record company. The record company said, "This album sucks. Redo it." And they're like, "No, we're not going to redo it. And like, you can't play this on the radio." And they're like, "No, we're not going to do it." So they had this big back and forth with their record company. Finally, bought it from the record company, sold it to the record company. It was their most successful album. So 20 years ago, for me, it's a big deal because it's a great album. So get a chance this week out there. Stream Yankee Hotel Foxtrot.
It would not be a Rabbit Trails podcast if there was not some kind of a little unknown music reference at the beginning or end.
Yes, yeah. That's why it's a little pop culture in there to finish out the podcast.
Josh, thanks for joining us, man. Listen, blessings to you as you travel to Romania. Mm-hmm. Enjoy some good Romanian food, and
I will.
It's just I got to make it there. Man, you got me.
There's food everywhere. That's it.
There's great food.
There's only one place in the world I don't really want to return, and that was a bad food experience. So that's how key food. No, I won't.
Don't say it. But I do think there's something.
Oklahoma.
You said it earlier. We did say it earlier. Was there's this kind of you process missions through and culture through food. I think there's something. I always feel like when someone comes into Spain and they love the food, I'm like This is a real missionary.
They'll stay.
They're gonna be all right.
How do you come to Spain and not love the food? I want to
you go to Malaga. You go to Malaga. You go to a hotel in Malaga. That's how it happens. Hey, no, actually, so I do have a theory. We'll get into. We should make a podcast on this, Garrick, because I do have. It is one of the ways of, in training for our staff in Sweden that we've talked about for years of getting people to enjoy food and breaking of bread. And I mean, it's just one of the principles of good evangelism. So we actually should just do a whole podcast on food and how
I think you're right.
Break down doors. Josh, are you in for that podcast, buddy?
I'll be in for it. That
all right. Sounds
we get to eat it while we're talking about it.
Right. I'll mail you some barbecue. How's that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I enjoyed the podcast.
That was awesome.
We'll catch you on the flip side, I guess.